November 17th, 2025. It's 1:30 p.m. and we're here for the 2024 Shoshone County and Shoshone County Ambulance District Audit presentation. And I will turn it over to our auditor.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. You guys all know me, but again, I'll just quick introduction. Tony Matson with Hayden Ross. I figured we would go through the ambulance service district first.
Okay.
We sort of talked about this in the past, but the ambulance service district is considered a component unit of the county. So we'll go through this. The ambulance service district actually ends up being a fund within the county's financial statements. So this will be easier to get through this first and then jump over to the counties.
Okay.
So there's two packages in front of you. The one without the tab is the graph package, and that's what we're going to talk through today. There's a narrative in the front that just talks about things I'm going to talk about today. It's got them kind of written down for you so you don't have to take as much notes as you might otherwise want to. But before we get started, any of the numbers, we issued a clean opinion on the financial statements for the ambulance service district. So we did have a financial statement finding related to the closing process. So we sort of talked about that. It wasn't there last year. Ultimately, the county took over the accounting for fiscal year 24. And in that process, some of the work that we had to do this year was really, like when the county took over the financials, it took a $700,000 check out of the ambulance service district bank account, deposited that as revenue, and just started moving, right? But the actual rest of the balances as of 9/30/23 never made it into the financials that you were always looking at current year activity without that historical initial cash. As cash was pulled out of the U.S. bank account, it came in as revenue. So it's all got in there, but the actual accounting for hey, here was our initial balance. There wasn't an initial equity account really established. It was just all the revenue that came in, or all the dollars that got transferred, it came in as revenue in the current year. So we did a number of adjustments just to reestablish the beginning balances and pull that out of the revenue so that you started where you ended. Okay. So that was one of the big adjustments we did. And then the second adjustment was related to the U.S. bank account. So the ambulance service district had a bank account pre-county taking over. Once the county took over, they opened up bank accounts in the name of the ambulance service district, and this U.S. bank account kind of hung out there. When did it actually get onto the statement of treasurer's cash? It got on in
the U.S. not until October.
Yeah, October of 24. So
25. Well, yeah.
Yeah, 24. Yeah. So just after the end of this year, that account was still not incorporated into the financial data that the
Treasurer had, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So, but it is on the statement of treasurer's cash now.
Okay.
We brought all the activity that went through that U.S. bank account for all of fiscal year 24, we brought that back in so that all of that was all inclusive within the financial statements that you have here. Those are the journal entries that we gave over to Timmy and Lori to get recorded. And ultimately, you guys probably know more about the U.S. bank account than I do, but the reason why it hasn't been closed is there are a number of, it's still not closed today, correct?
No.
Yeah, so there's a number of auto payments that are set up into that account from all these different organizations that are paying bills, government organizations and such. And I know that Carrie's been working on it. It's just working on getting all of those people to change those auto pays so that U.S. bank account can actually get closed. Jeff, you had asked me well, should we just close the account? And my recommendation was, well, let's not do that because you're just going to cut off those dollars are just going to not come into those accounts. And then it would sort of force the issue, but that if you don't know who to get a hold of right now, you probably still won't know when they're also not paying you. So those are just, I know that Carrie's working, and I don't know what you guys have done in fiscal year after this year.
I think there's just very little still going in there.
Yeah. Yeah, which is great.
So a lot of it's been taken care of.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's all under Carrie's control now, so she
Yeah.
sees what's happening. And
So
and
at the
it's
end,
under the county's
at the end of
stuff.
6/30/24, there was like $85,000 in that U.S. bank account. So we brought all that activity for the year and put that also within here.
Okay.
So ultimately, that led to us having this financial statement closing finding, which is just really the closing process needs to improve, needs to get formalized. We're gonna start working. We actually started working this an hour ago. Came up about an hour early for us to start talking through just some things as we're working on fiscal year 25, getting that closed up. So that's the same finding that we have in the ambulance service district. It's also in the counties because they're sort of kind of mirrored each other from that perspective. So there is a significant deficiency letter here. It just required communication that talks about that deficiency and kind of lines it out in here. Okay. The other thing that's also right here is just our ending governance letter, which is required communication that talks about upcoming accounting standards, talks about significant estimates in the financial statements, which really just come down to your capital assets, like your depreciable lives that you're using for your capital assets. Okay. And most importantly, that we didn't have any disagreements with management. So despite having a finding, I do want to thank Timmy and Lori for all their work. There's a lot of work when it comes to closing the books and getting ready for the audit and doing the audit. So they were great to work with. All right, so diving into the numbers, the general fund. Yep, turn to this guy. Yeah, you're there. Everybody's there, I think. General fund operations recap. Service district started the year with fund balance or equity of $602,000. Revenues were $1,406,000. Expenses were $1,316,000. And the district ended the year with a fund balance of $692,142, which was an increase of about $89,000 this last year. Okay. If we look at the last 3 years that it's been in existence, just to kind of get some sense of where we came from, revenues have been greater than expenses in 2 of the last 3 years. We obviously don't have a lot of historical data for the ambulance service district yet. 22, there was the initial transfer. So that's why revenues were so high in that first year. It was just like all those monies effectively got donated to the ambulance service district from the corporation. So that came in as revenue. That sort of set 22. 23 was sort of the first year of operations. And you can see that, 23 and 24 were similar in nature here. But as we kind of build up this 10-year history, we get a little better sense of sort of historical numbers for the ambulance service district. If we look at the fund balance for the district, I have 2 lines here. Again, we'll build this out to a 10-year history. I always like the 10-year history. I just think it gives us a good perspective on what's been happening. I have the bottom line there is a 2-month minimum recommendation. There's no formal minimum fund balance policy, but I've just used 2 months just as sort of a minimum standard. With the county, I started at 2 months, and I usually go to 5 as sort of a range. The ambulance service district might not need as much as that 5 just because they have constant revenues that are coming in. It's not as relying on the tax revenue. But it's usually why I go to the 5 months is you got to kind of make it to that first tax payment, which happens in January, which is those first 3 months. District ended the year, that 2-month line for 24 is $219,000 of 2 months worth of expenditures. The district's sitting at about 6.3 months. That 692,000 equals 6.3 months worth of operating expenses. The prior year was that 602 is 4.9 months. So from a real spending perspective, went from 4.9 to 6.3 months this last year. So in reasonable shape from that perspective. Look at the revenues a little bit closer. Total revenues again were $1,406,000. That was a decrease year over year of about $53,000. The primary source of revenue is going to be patient revenue at $815,000. It's actually a net number, so there is an allowance that gets written out. There's a certain contract allowance percent that the district has historically used to write off some of their collections as an allowance.
Mhm.
So this $815,000 is that net number. The contract adjustments that were recorded in fiscal year 24 were $496,000. So, total billings out the door were closer to 1.3 million.
Okay.
Right? And then contract adjustments bring that back to 496, or bring that down to the 815.
Okay.
The prior year total billings were $674,000. So that $815,000 is about $140,000 increase year over year. Okay. Property taxes came in at about $500,000. That's going to be property taxes, interest, penalties, all those type of revenue streams. The prior year was $475,000. That was an increase of about $25,000, which really mirrors about the levy increase.
Mm-hmm.
So the levy for fiscal year 23 was $505,000. For fiscal year 25, that levy went to $522,000, or about $17,000 higher. So, we're talking 2 years ago now, right?
Yeah.
So I got to get in this room faster next year. Yeah. So your L2 for fiscal year 25 was about $17,000 faster or higher. Okay. Grant income came in at $37,000. That's the health and welfare grant that the district got in fiscal year 24. I did want to make a side note that there are 2 other grants that the district had not spent any of the money at the end of 9/30/24. One of them was an ARPA grant for $192,000. And the second one was the county had actually given the ambulance service district $150,000. Mm-hmm. So those 2 in combination, $342,000. That has not been reported as revenue yet, and it will be reported once the ambulance purchase happened. Mm-hmm. So none of this revenue is going to include this other $342,000 that the county or the district does in fact have in their possession, mm-hmm. but the revenue won't be recognized until those ambulance purchases occur. So you match up the revenue.
But you're counting it. You're
Yes.
counting it. So just to make sure that
I know
you
it's
understand.
there.
Yeah. Yeah, just sometimes people will like, oh, I know that we have that money, but it's not part of the equity.
Yeah, it's not part of
It's sitting there as like you have the cash and it's deferred revenue until you have a qualifying expenditure. Okay. And investment earnings were $48,000 last year as well. Looking on the expenditure side of things. Oh, let me back up. No, that was my only note there. I apologize. On the expenditure side, current year expenditures again were $1,316,000. The prior year was $1,474,000. So the current year expenditures were actually about $158,000 less than the prior year. Professional services made up $914,000. That was about $53,000 higher than the prior year. So everything, professional services are primarily going to be like billing services, the audits in there, and then payments to Fire District number 1 and number 2 are both part of what's professional services. Bad debt expense is, we talked about an allowance, but when things are actually written off, it's bad debt. Mm-hmm. It's different than establishing an allowance. So bad debt expenses were $33,000 this last year. The rest of the expenditures were similar to the prior year, except for capital outlay. So that second from the top there, capital outlay in the current year was $34,000. In the prior year, it was just over $300,000. So the primary reduction of expenditures this year was less capital spending. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Because we need to get our ambulances in this year, so.
Yeah. So in fiscal year 23, you had $38,000 of equipment. You had bought the 2022 ambulance for $250,000. So anytime you have a big capital investment, you're going to see your expenditures jump. You're going to see that capital outlay go up. Just fiscal year 24 was not as heavy as an investment year. Okay. Overall, I think it was a good year. 6.3 months of operating expenses and fund balance. You have that $342,000 cash there waiting to make those ambulance purchases. And then we're going to work on the internal controls.
Okay.
We have a plan.
Well, it is good. There, it's gaining. And that's what we want. So we're doing good. Appreciate that.
Yep. All right. So, ambulance service district. I didn't want to hand these all out all at once because I don't know about you, but I've been carrying these around and I've confused them myself 4 or 5 times. So it's kind of easier to hand them out when it's time.
Thank you.
So I put one back here.
Thank you.
Yep. Scott, do you want to look at this? Whatever. I mean, you're here now. You're stuck. All right. All right, so same situation, same presentation as the ambulance service district, just we got some more things to talk about. First of all, we issued a clean opinion. Okay, clean opinion on the financial statements. They are fairly stated as presented. We did have the financial statement closing process finding. So same finding as in the ambulance service district. For the county, it is a bigger job to close than the district, the ambulance service district, right? The counties have always been the wild, wild west of accounting in my mind because there are just so many things happening, right? So when you're trying to encapsulate all that, we have things that have to be looked at the end of the year. There's accounts receivable, we got accounts payable. There's all the grant recs that we have to make sure are done. You have road and bridge projects that we got to make sure all of your reimbursement dollars are coming in, and we got to make sure that we're accruing that all back. You have a lot more fixed assets that are being purchased all over the county, trying to get those tracked down. And then, as we had talked about, the county has a bunch of leases. So all of those things are just spread out, and you don't have one lease, you have like 40 leases. So it's just things that we're kind of brainstorming on some just ways to help capture that from a perspective of what's happening in the accounting department, and then using that data to really go through, like, this is how we're going to close the books. Okay. So it's my intention to work with Timmy and Lori on that. Similar to the ambulance service district, it's just this is a different animal. But that's ultimately what we need to do, what the county needs to do, in order to really get a good process put in place. So these things are just, you're starting in October, right? And November at the end of the year, and have that good checklist. And I'm going to say it's multiple 100 hours worth of work, right? Like, it's not just we got 1 week and we'll be closed. It's going to be something that's going to occur over a series of a couple months as you kind of get all these little pieces put back together. So we're just going to start. That's what we're going to do. I'm personally taking a week off, so I'm not starting until December.
I've already been looking.
But that's what we're going to do. Same ending governance letter, upcoming auditing or accounting standards, significant estimates are going to be a little bit more here. You have capital assets, you have long-term debt, you have lease, you have different estimates that go with, like, determining lease liabilities and such. You have your per-se liability. So there's just more estimates also that are kind of baked into the financial statements for the county. We have a single audit. So single audit, it was also issued, single audit report was issued as part of the financial statements. Single audit is a compliance audit. When the county spends over $750,000 of federal award money, you're required to have a single audit. We issued a clean opinion on the single audit, no findings. There is, if you dig back into here, you'll see that there was a single audit finding from fiscal year 23, and that is pending resolution from the federal government right now. So that finding is just updated. That in here it says that the county is just waiting for final resolution for the State Department of Treasury on the procurement that was a fiscal year 23 item. Okay. So I just updated to that. That's where we're at, and then hopefully that will be resolved in fiscal year. Well, hopefully it'll be resolved soon, because it will. I guess it's not resolved as of 9/30/25, so it will. That'll be the same status update. Well, I think we can say as a subsequent event for fiscal year 25 if we get it. If you get final resolution between now and us issuing the 25 audit, we'll just have a subsequent event saying the results of it.
Okay.
I'll start hounding them.
Yeah, you can try. They have to be open
I was
first.
gonna say, it has to be open.
So the total federal awards for the county in fiscal year 24 were $4.6 million. Primarily, that's a higher number for the county than it's historically been. You have the last little bit of the SLFRS money, the ARPA money, $727,000 you spent of that in fiscal year 24. Your LATCF fund, you started utilizing that in 24. You spent about $1.3 million of that.
Okay.
But if we jump over to look at, we'll talk about those kind of at the end. Again, those two funds, the SLFRF and the LATCF. But we're going to jump into current expense. Current expense started the year with equity or fund balance of $3,344,000. Revenues of $3,749,000. Expenditures of $3,204,000. Ended the year with a fund balance of $3,888,000, which was an increase of about $544,000 last year.
Okay.
So positive year for current expense. Looking at a 10-year trend, the big change here is obviously between fiscal year 22 and 23, the Justice Fund was established and the Justice Fund expenditures were pulled out of current expense. So you can see these, so the revenue and expenses both then falling in fiscal year 23 and 24 to where they are right now. With that said, revenues have been greater than expenses in 8 of the last 10 years for current expense, including each of the last 5, which is great. If we look at how this has affected the fund balance, so this was sort of interesting. I wasn't expecting this to necessarily happen this way. But what here, so the light green lines are going to be your 2 and your 5 months sort of like minimum fund balance recommendation, right? With the more darker green line being your actual ending fund balance. Obviously, there's a big shift from 22 to 23. Those minimum balances fall dramatically simply because you don't have to have fund balance for any of the justice expenses, right? In fiscal year 23, the revenue your fund balance went from that $2,299,000 to that $3,344,000. That was primarily due to the Maverick sale. So all those revenues from the Maverick property sale occurred and were reported in fiscal year 23. My expectation for 24 was going to be some level of a flat line without that $2 million in there. But again, the current expense was able to earn another $544,000, and the expenditure profile dropped even more, right? So a 2-month and a 5-month line is now between $534,000 and $1,300,000. The $3.8 million of fund balance represents about 14.5 months worth of operating expenses. Okay, current expense is actually not necessarily operating as much on the levy. The levy for last year was $433,000, which is only 14% of the revenue that's coming into the current expense. So the levy for 25 remained exactly the same. So your 25 levy and 24 were the same at 433. It will be interesting to see how fiscal year 25 shakes out to see if you do in fact have another $500,000 gain, or if this flatlines or if it goes down. I'm not exactly sure. You guys would have a better sense of that now. But it was sort of outside of my expectation, knowing that the fiscal year 23 had that big Maverick sale at $2.1 million that came in there. This does give the county some options moving forward. And we'll look at that in a minute, but a lot of the revenue and current expense is going to be intergovernmental revenues, like shared revenues that's coming in. And there's the county does have some options, and like not all those shared revenues have to go into the general fund. So you usually have an ability to divide those out. So looking into fiscal year 26, 27, looking at your allocation of all those shared revenues, it doesn't necessarily, if you're sort of like same as last year in terms of the percentages. It is one of the reasons why you ended up with a higher fund balance. It's just that you had that same level of allocation of those shared revenues in 24, and it's just sort of led to this fund balance increase. So again, without talking about adjusting the levy, because the levy itself isn't really that, obviously you could adjust the levy, but levy isn't really what's driving this as much as just the other shared revenues that are coming into current expense. And if we look at those revenues a little bit closer, total revenues again were $3,749,000. That was a decrease of about $1.7 million year over year. The big one there being the Maverick sale, right? That was the primary reason for the reduction. Charges for services came in at 20% of the revenues at $752,000. The big item in there is going to be your admin fee. So the admin fee that the current expense is charging to all the funds for admin services, that was $557,000. That's in charges for services.
That's in the intergovernment.
That's in charges for services here.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So that's because you're effectively charging for those admin services to those. But year over year is about a $42,000 increase in charges for services. Well, the big item in there is obviously the admin fees. License and permits were $302,000. That was up about $50,000 year over year. So your motor vehicle fees are in here. They were up $23,000 in fiscal year 24. Your building permit money was up $18,000 year over year. Those were the two big ones that happened in there. But that's what's kind of like residing in license and permits. Other expenditures, $780,000. The prior year it was $2.5 million, with obviously the big one being the Maverick sale came in as other revenue. Of the $780,000, interest income makes up the majority of that at $588,000. So pretty good interest earning environment fiscal year 2024. $588,000 came in and allocated to current expense. Your tax revenue came in at $512,000. So that was your levy was at $433,000. You also, the way your governmental funds is, collection rates do affect how much you get to recognize as revenue. So your collection rate was actually a little bit better. You got to recognize $34,000 due to changes in your deferred revenue. Your penalties and interest was $17,000, and then your property replacement money came in at $28,000. So all of those items are in that tax component there.
Okay.
Your intergovernmental revenue was $1,399,000, 37% of the dollar amounts. That was effectively the same as it was in fiscal year 23. It's $12,000 higher, but that's going to be your sales tax money, revenue sharing money, your liquor apportionment, and your PILT money. Okay. Is all sitting in your intergovernmental revenue.
What about SRS funding? Or that's all roads?
That's going to be all going to be in roads. Yep, 100%. So not any of that's going to be in current expense. Looking at the expenditure side of things, current year expenditures were $3,204,000. In the prior year, there were $4,472,000. So you actually had a reduction of about $1.2 million. The big one there is in fiscal year 23. There was a $1,188,000 transfer, which is shown as an expense. That transfer to the Justice Fund was shown as an expense here. So you take that out, and your expenditures look real similar year over year. Okay. General government expenditures at $2,966,000. That was an increase of about $173,000 year over year. Primarily, that increase was salary and benefit increases. Increases in professional service fees, and then your building code expense, which is sort of highlighted as about $40,000 higher in fiscal year 24. So you also had more building permit revenue, so it's sort of mirrored along there. But those were the three biggest changes. Public safety expenses were $233,000. Your debt service is just lease expenses, so lease-related expenses. And capital outlay was down. So capital outlay, so these are going to be generally things that you think about as like long-term assets. Hardly any capital outlay investment expenses in fiscal year 2024. $4,778. It was $107,000 in the prior year. But if you just the transfer to the justice fund, that's the big difference. Other than that, like you're sort of materially about the same revenue or expenditure level as you were in the prior year. Okay. Looking at the road fund. Road fund started the year with equity of $3,532,000. Revenues were $6,223,000. Expenditures were $4,943,000. And ended the year with a fund balance of $4,812,000, which was an increase of $1,279,000.
Okay.
That's good. Looking at the 10-year trend, revenues have been greater than expenses of 8 of the last 10 years, including each of the last 6. You've had an increase in your fund balance. I don't have the same level of graph, so we don't have to. You guys, I won't talk to you for an hour and a half today, but revenues were up about $1.5 million. That's primarily highway user money was up about $500,000 year over year. Part of this is just the way there's a $600,000 revenue item for your financing. So you sort of purchase 2 motor graders, and the way that the accounting works is you end up with this $600,000 like financing revenue and a $600,000 expense. So it just sort of inflates the way that looks. But that's $600,000 of that. You had about $176,000 more in grant revenue that came in this last year. And then the other one that was sort of a highlight was Forest Service revenue was $200,000. That was a new item for the year, and it was your Coeur d'Alene River Road reimbursement from the USDA.
Okay.
So it was for you guys like removed it. I think you chipped it and then resealed it.
Yep.
Yeah. So you got a $200,000 reimbursement from USDA for that. Okay. So those are kind of the big differences in your revenues. Expenditures were up about $746,000 year over year. Again, capital outlay. So those purchases of those motor graders, your capital outlay was actually about $470,000 higher than it was the year before. And then you also paid off about $189,000 of debt service expense. So a lot of times what happens is when you trade in vehicles, you have to account for the fact that it was like a net zero to the county, but you did actually pay off the rest of the financing, and then you got more financing. So you just like gross up all those to the true numbers, and those just kind of elevated your revenues and expenses in the current year. But the big difference there was just more capital investment. The graders purchases in the current year. If we look at your ending fund balance, again, same situation, 2 and 5 month line, just as a sort of a reference point. The $4,812,000 represents about 11.7 months worth of operating expenses, which is a good spot to be. I mean, I know that it's a big number, but road fund can spend money pretty fast too. So I know when we were down back in 2017 at that low point, just having $1 million was just, even though that was in that range, just sitting at, that was like 3.9 months worth of operating expenses back then. You just have a lot more flexibility now in terms of road projects and things that you guys want to do, what you can do, things that you can do without necessarily having to have reimbursements or other grants awarded related to it. But have increased that 11.7 months. Which is, I think, is good for the county. There's always roads that need work.
Yep.
They never stop. So Justice Fund, again, this is going to be the second year of operation for the Justice Fund. Started the year with a fund balance of $789,000, revenues of $5,871,000, expenses of $5,829,000. Ended the year with a fund balance of $831,000, an increase of about $41,000 on the year. 2-year history, both positive for the Justice Fund. Fiscal year 23 had that large increase, which is really the establishment of that transfer that came in from the current expense, sort of built that initial fund balance. The current year looks more like a net zero year. $41,000 is effect. I don't know what the percentage is, but it's still like effectively flat, right? Effectively a wash. Revenues were down year over year, about $457,000. That was somewhat expected. I mean, the transfer was $1.2 million, but then your taxes came in $517,000, and your intergovernmental revenue was about $218,000 more than the prior year. So that was good. Expenses were up $238,000, primarily in salaries and benefits. Looking at fund balance. Justice funds just establishing themselves, right? So you are under that 2-month line. It's exact same in terms of relative dollars, 1.7 months worth of fund balance at the beginning of the year, 1.7 months at the end of the year. So it's still right there. It's just something to watch as you're moving forward. So the levy for 25 was about $258,000 higher than 24. Obviously, I don't know what the other expenditure makeup is, but just all things being equal, that's going to like push you into that range if everything else kind of falls into place similar to the last 2 years. But just something to watch, see where Justice Fund ends up as we finish up fiscal year 24 or 25. Solid waste charge. This is a fund that charges for services. So the accounting is done just a little bit different for when a fund is supported by user fees. It's called a proprietary fund. I've kind of had this discussion in the past. The reason I bring that up is your equity, whereas your governmental funds, your equity is just basically your cash and receivable carryover. And the solid waste, your carryover is going to include any of that cash and receivables, but also like the value of your investment. So your capital assets are also included in that equity balance. So this $2,453,000, $1.2 million of that is actually the value of net investments, right? Like it's non-spendable, you can't spend it. And you had $1,242,000 of unassigned fund balance or equity at the beginning of the year. So that's really what was available when you started the year for operations. Revenues were $1,836,000, expenditures were $1,633,000, and you ended the year with a equity of $2,656,000. So if we break that $2,656,000 down, your net investment in capital assets was $1,495,000 of that, and your unrestricted was $1,161,000. So if we looked at your unrestricted balance, it actually dropped $81,000 last year. So most of your increase was just in investments in capital assets, but your actual operations sort of in some way lost about $80,000. If you look at your revenue and expenses over the last 10 years, revenues have been greater than expenses in 10 of the last 10 years. And then when we look at how that has affected the equity on the next page, this graph is what I've done is really taking that 2 to 5 month recommendation, and then as a base I just added all your net investment and capital assets to the bottom of it. So when we look at this line compared to where your equity, it's adjusted for the fact that you have this big non-spendable portion, if that makes sense. So when you ended the year, that $2,656,000, a 2-month minimum would be ending at $1,767,000. Okay, that 5 months would be $2,176,000. So you're still above that. The $2,656,000 represents about 8.5 months worth of operating expenses. Historically, the prior year was 9.1. It's kind of hard to it still went up, but from a relative, you actually, from your operation standpoint, you did have a little bit of a loss, that $81,000, and it did 8.5 months worth of operating expenses. It's still in a good spot, but just it is something to note. It's if I look back over from 2020. It was 10.1, then 9.9, then 9.3, then 9.1, then 8.5. So from relative spending, it has slowly only down 1.6 months over 5 years there, right? You could do that for a lot longer period of time and still be fine. But just the trend is that you're on relative dollars just slowly losing a little bit each year. But still, 8.5 months, if you're sitting on it, that's a great spot to be. Okay. The two funds that I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about, but I just wanted to bring up is your ARPA fund.
Mhm.
So all of your ARPA money was to be obligated by December 31st of 2024. At the end of fiscal year 24, you had about $327,000 left of unused ARPA dollars. So I'm assuming all those actually did get used or obligated at the beginning of fiscal year 25. And your LATCF fund had just over $6 million in fund balance as you rolled into 6/30/24 as well. So the LATCF funds has a longer time period for utilizing those dollars, but had $6 million left of that stuff. Overall for the year, I think it was a good year. Current expense, road, justice, all had increases. Solid waste is in good shape. Like we talked about, we're going to continue to work on the closing process, get those numbers squared away at the end of the year. But all in all, I think you guys are in a pretty good spot.
Okay.
Have any questions for me?
No, not really. This is 2024. I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, it's not the 2025.
No.
Yeah, you guys have a better sense. I'm kind of talking blind because I am always talking in the past. But the plan is my intention is the first week here of December to send you guys over like items needed listing. Let's start talking about things that we want to do to get, or that I would think we'd want to do to get closed, and then work on trying to get here probably in February for field work and just be done faster. That would be the goal.
Okay.
All right.
Appreciate all the work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any questions? Anybody got any questions?
Just clarification. Did I catch it right that there was 300,000 left in ARPA funds that weren't spent?
As of 9/30/24, there was
Oh,
327,000. So
Yeah, I've got to turn the date back.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
yeah, I did say fiscal year 24, but yeah, those had to be obligated by the end of December. So
Okay,
Yeah.
24.
24.
The next year.
Well, yeah, in fiscal year 25, that
Right,
they
you're
should be all
on it-
gone
You're
now.
on it next year.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, 100%.
All right. Do you guys have any other further questions? Nothing
No,
further?
thank you.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much, and thank you, Madam Clerk and
Yes.
Auditor, for
Yeah. Thank you
Your
for all
hard
your
work.
help.
Yep.
Yes.
thank you.
All right.
All right, we're adjourned.